Welcome to another segment of my biology videos, and this time we are continuing with what we are calling as being hemophilia, which is an X-linked condition. So you might wonder, what exactly is hemophilia? Well, hemophilia is simply an inherited disease where a person bleeds for longer periods than normal due to poor clotting of blood. So you might have actually seen people, when they injure themselves, in order for blood to stop moving from a wound or the injury that they have, it may take a longer period of time. But this may actually be caused by lack of blood clotting factors, and these blood clotting factors are known as factor 8 and also factor 9. Now what you need to remember is that these blood clotting factors are simply proteins that are found in the body that help in the clotting of blood. For example, if you remember fibrinogen, prothrombin, globulin, albumin, and many other proteins that can help in the clotting of blood. Now, there's going to be a mutation in these, factors that cause, mutation. So where there's a mutation that takes place, it actually leads, to lack of these blood clotting factors. Now, one thing that you need to remember is that the allele for hemophilia, small letter h, is actually recessive to the allele for normal blood clotting, which we use as being capital letter H. So you need to know the possible genotypes and phenotypes for hemophilia. So let me give you just the possible, genotypes and phenotypes. Let me start with a person who is a male. So this side maybe I can say if I'm actually male. So if I'm actually male, I can have X, remember X and Y, but these characters are found on what we are calling the X chromosome. They do not occur on the Y chromosome. So if on the X chromosome of capital H, remember that capital H is dominant, representing normal blood clotting, then it simply means that this one is actually a normal male. But the moment on the X chromosome you have got that recessive allele, yeah, remember that recessive allele is the one that causes hemophilia. It simply means that such a male is actually hemophilic, like we can say, or sick. So we can either say hemophilic, or we can simply say, oh, such a person is actually, sick. So in males, these are the only possible genotypes that you can have. It's either you are normal or you are sick. There's nothing like, no, me as a male, I'm a carrier. No wonder these X-linked conditions like hemophilia are more common in males. What about, in terms of what we are calling as being a female? Well, in females, a female can have, remember, she carries the X and the X chromosome, so she can have a capital H and a capital H. So that actually represent, a normal female. So a normal female, normal blood clotting. But if she's X capital H and X, small h, it simply means that she's normal but a carrier. So we simply say normal carrier, female. She's normal, but she's a carrier of the allele that causes hemophilia. So when can a female become sick? When on both her X chromosome, you find that there's this recessive allele. They are found on the two X chromosomes that are there. Then we can simply say, such a person, a female, is actually hemophilic or is actually sick. So you can see that in females, they can be carriers, but they are normal. So we call them as being normal carriers, or you can just be absolutely normal. So these are the possible, genotypes and phenotypes that you can have both in males and female. Now let's show you how you can go about, to answer question on hemophilia. So I do have a question here. It's coming from the 2023 paper 2 question number 5 ECZ exams. So it says a hemophilic mother had two sons who were both hemophilic. So she had two sons and both sons were hemophilic, meaning that they were sick. The father was a non-hemophilic, so meaning that the father was actually normal. Then the question says define the term hemophilia. I believe you are able to do that. Remember, hemophilia, it is simply, like we said, an inherited disease where a person bleeds for longer periods than normal. Now, what causes that? It is due to lack of clotting, factor. So a person bleeds for longer periods than normal due to poor clotting of blood, due to lack of those, clotting factors. And those clotting factors come about because of a mutation in certain genes that are going to take place in the body. Right, so right away, I'll move on to the B part. It says using letters, small letter H and capital letter H, write down the genotypes of the father. So they want us to write down the genotypes. So remember it says a hemophilic mother had two sons. So the mother was actually hemophilic and the father was non-hemophilic. So for the father, the genotype of the father in this case, the genotype of the father is going to be X, capital H, and Y because he was non-hemophilic. What about the mother? What would be the genotype? Well, for the mother, it is very simple. Because she was hemophilic, it simply means that she's going to have the recessive allele carried on both X chromosomes. So that these are the genotypes of the father and also the mother. Now remember what I told you. What is important is for you to remember these genotypes and possible phenotypes because that is what you're going to be using in the exam. Now notice the C part, what the question there says. Using a genetic diagram, explain why both boys were hemophilic. So we want to use a genetic diagram to explain why both boys were hemophilic. So let's find out by using a genetic diagram. So for the C part there, I'm going to put up the P1. So I'm going to put up the P1, the first parental generation. Remember, you start with a phenotype. What is the phenotype? Of course, I can talk about the father, crossing with the mother. That's what we mean. So what do you go to? Remember, you go to the genotype. Now, what is inside of the genes of the father? Remember, what's the genotype for the father? He was a non-hemophilic, so capital H and Y. And what about the mother? Small h there and there small h. Then, of course, when meiosis takes place, it is going to result in the formation of gametes or sex cells. So these, during the process of meiosis, a reduction, division, they will separate and you are going to have capital H there. I love to circle it like I always tell you to show that they have actually separated. There I'm going to have a small h and again I'm going to have a small h in that direction. Then random fertilization will take place. So this one will pair with the first one. Then again this one will pair with the last one in that case. So you come to this one, this gamete will pair with that gamete, and this gamete will pair with the last gamete. So there's going to be random, fertilization or assortment of these gametes. So now what are we going to have in terms of the F1, the first phero generation? So remember, the first thing you see is simply the genotype, what is inside of the gene. So you're going to have capital H and small h. There you are going to have capital H and small h. There you are going to have small h and y. There you are going to have small h again and y. So let's come to what we are calling as being the phenotype. So if you notice, these are simply females. They are both carriers. In other words, two, they are actually normal, but they are carriers of the allele that causes hemophilia. Now, if you notice again, these two, these are two, males or boys. And if you notice there, because they have that recessive on their X chromosome, it simply means that they are hemophilic or they are actually sick. So we can see that from this genetic diagram that indeed, the boys are actually going to be hemophilic. Possibly, the question was saying, using a genetic diagram, explain why both boys were hemophilic. So you can see there. We can even put up the probability. Because of my space, let me put it just here. So the probability that the boys were actually hemophilic, there were two boys that were hemophilic over the total number of children, which is 4 multiplied by 100%, which is going to give us 50%. So 50% of the children, in this case the male, children, the boys, are going to be hemophilic. Thank you so much for watching. Watch out for my next video as we look at another X-linked condition called, red-green, color blindness.